Welcome back to this series on the World Domination Custom Cabinetry app. Today we're going to talk about companies and contacts. Companies is where the information about the companies you work for lives. Contacts is where the information about the people you work for lives. In companies, we keep the typical contact information like, and let's go ahead and open one of these up and see what type of information, and you can see it across here as well. There's multiple ways of viewing the data that lives in each of these pages that include a database. Almost every page we take you to will include a database. So this being the database, the company's database, we have three views. We'll talk more about that as we go, but these are looking at the same data, just filtered or sorted differently. So in this case, we're looking at all the active companies in a table view. So this is a table view. Here we're looking at all the companies that have been entered in a table view, kind of like a spreadsheet view. And then here we're looking at a sales pipeline in what we call a board view or Kanban view, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But if we open any one of these companies up, we see the type of data we have here. So we're going to link people or contacts to the company, and we're going to link the company to projects as well. Normally this is done on the other side of this equation. We'll start a project and link the project to the company, not link the company to a project. Then we have some information that you may or may not want to use. You can delete it if you don't want to use it, or you can just leave it there and not utilize it. But if you find these things helpful, or if you need these prompts, maybe as a cabinet maker or as a craftsman you find sales a little difficult for you, maybe these prompts and reminders would help you do a better job in the sales process. So we have a lead source, and we can list out the things that we think are important: Facebook, sales calls, static advertising, just the things that work for us, whether that's the Home Builders Association, somebody referred them. Ultimately, in time, in aggregate, this becomes valuable information to look back and see where the bulk of your customers are coming from and where we might be able to focus some attention to get better results. And in the sales pipeline, status of where they are. So that board is based off of these statuses. And just real quick, the statuses are suspect, which means the person is not aware of you. The company that you're wanting to work for is not aware of you. And then a prospect is someone who is aware of you. And qualified means they are both aware of you and they have a need. Here, they could be a prospect, but you're not certain yet whether they need cabinets or not. Here, you know they need cabinets. They're building a house or they're getting ready to remodel a house. You know they're going to need cabinets, so they are qualified and they have a need. And then once you convert them to a customer, they're listed as a customer. And then you will find some people that ultimately you won't want to work for. You don't believe they can afford your cabinetry or various reasons, and they would be disqualified so that no one on your team wastes time contacting them in the future. And then we have next steps. This can be valuable to some people that need those little reminders and little prompts to go do a site visit, do some of these things. And ultimately, this reminder here, nurture the customer. Once they are a customer, cabinet makers many times are not good about nurturing the people that they have won as customers, as well as other companies do. Then we have typical stuff: street address, city, state, zip, phone, email. Again, this is our single source of truth. We want that information. If someone's out on a job site or visiting a job or something like that, that they have access to this information to be able to contact the person at the company that they need to get an answer from or something like that. Now, what we're looking at right now is what's called a card view, but we can open this as a page. So we have a card open for this company, and we can open it as a page right here. All it does is take the whole page. If the page is set up to do it, you can set them up here as small text and full width. I typically do use that. It doesn't change it a lot, but it makes a little more room, a little more compact, and then use that full width. And so that's a nice feature to have. Some people prefer it to be centered up like that. Some people like to use that full page. You have control over that. You can just always come to these three dots and change that. And then back on the company's page in these views, again, this is the active view. These companies have an active project. You'll see here in this all view that only those two have an active project. That's why they don't show up here and they do show up there. But this sales pipeline, this is a good daily reminder. This is also going to show up in your dashboard. Every morning you would go look at your dashboard. We'll look at that fairly in depth when we get to that course. But the objective here, and we already talked about what these mean: suspect, prospect, qualified, customer, and disqualified. In these Kanban views, it's as easy as this to move them. Just literally slide them. And these companies need to live in the appropriate area. So these two companies are, of course, made up companies, but these companies are suspects. They are not aware of us. We're aware of them, but they're not aware of us. And our first objective is to make these companies, these are target companies that we want to sell cabinetry to. And so once we've made them aware of us, we would slide them over here to this prospect column or Kanban or bucket. And at that point, they would stay there until we determined whether they needed cabinetry or not. So second reach out, however we go about that, whether we go visit them, whether we send them an email, whether we send them a letter, however we reach out to them, visit them on a job site. At some point in time, they become aware of us, and then at some point in time, we find out whether they need cabinets or not. Once we know for certain that they need cabinets, they would go into this column or bucket or Kanban. So some people would start here. The very first contact would tell you that they're qualified. They contacted you, but they're not a customer yet. And so somebody that contacted you would go here because you know they have a need. They reached out to you. They're looking for cabinets. And so they would start in the qualified column. And then once you won the deal, once you sold them cabinetry, you would move them into the customer column. So this reminder is very valuable to some people to be able to, on a daily or weekly basis, have that reminder to reach out to these people, and try, you're always trying to move the people from the left column all the way into the customer column. And then ultimately the people that you don't want to work for, get them identified and have them in that disqualified column so that no one wastes time in the future. You may not want to basically disqualify them into infinity and beyond. You may want to say, maybe we just reach out to those people once a year to see if something's changed, that kind of thing. But we don't want to spend a lot of time on people that have said we do not want to do business with you, or we can't afford your company's cabinetry, whatever that reason might be. Then the next step here, or the next page here, is the contacts. So if we go into the contacts, we have some basic information. Again, we have two views, and you can have as many of these views as you see here that we have an add view button, so you can have as many of these views as you think you need, and they can be set up using these two options, sort and filters. We'll look more deeply at those as we go forward, but in this case we're looking at all the contacts, and here we're looking at the active contacts, the contacts that actually have a project. This being all the contacts and this being the active contacts. So within the contacts themselves, again, we see some of the data here, but we can always open a card up. We will see more data in the open card because we're going to put some portals there, and that's the important part about contacts. And so again, we've opened this up as a card. One of the advantages to a card view is that it's compact and we can still scroll down and see everything, but we can also navigate. So you see we're on this Beeson contact, and that's the first one in this list. If we wanted to go to the second contact, we could click that down caret. We can't do that from the page view, and so we can scroll through. So if you were looking at appliances, that might be valuable, or even customers, and you're wanting to change one thing in each customer, you could very quickly do that and navigate from one customer to the next in your list. But most of the time you're going to want to open it up into page view so you have more real estate, so you can kind of see everything at once. And so we have this basic information here about the contact themselves, the name. So what we ask you to fill in up here is the last name, and then when you fill in the first name here, we concatenate those together into this name field. And then we have a type, whether they're a builder or owner. Then we have an occupation. Again, in the aggregate, this information may be valuable in the future. You may find that some occupations, some people don't like to work for attorneys. Some people don't like to work for engineers. They think they're too picky. Some people love working for engineers because they know what they want. But if you have this information in the aggregate and you find that you're kind of identifying problem client, you may find that there's a correlation between the occupation and people you don't want to work for. And so aggregating that information may be valuable to you. Here's where we link the contact to the company. And it doesn't really matter whether you do it from the company and then link the contact, or whether you create the contact and link it back to the company. You can do it either way, and we'll see all that when we actually start creating projects. And then this particular one is linked to a single project. If there were 10 projects, they would be listed here. But then we have the basic information: street address, city, state, zip, phone, email. Not really using this appointment thing now. Probably want to do that a little more sophisticated, but you could if you wanted to. It's basically just going to give you a calendar view to be able to say, I want to meet the so-and-so on such and such date. And then any attachments specific to the customer. Most of the attachment type things you would do with a customer are going to be in another place, not here. And you'll see that as we get further along into the projects and rooms. And so this part down here is a little interesting. This is brand new. We've just done this in the last few weeks. We're calling it elicitations for lack of a better term, but basically what elicitations are is what we need to proceed. We're finding that in a post-COVID world, getting answers from clients, especially new construction projects where a builder is involved, we're having more trouble getting answers to questions than we've ever had in the past. And so we're trying to create some sort of methodology, reminders to ask the questions on a weekly basis and to follow up. And so these elicitations, now here the client would never see them. I mean, you'll see them later in the projects where they would see them. This is where we would take a quick peek of, does so-and-so have any elicitations? But in this name field, you'll put whoever you're asking the question of, and then in this second column, you'll have the question that you're asking. Hey, we need your selections, we need your plant specifications, what's the crown height, what's the casing width? All of these things have a place for you to enter the answers, but here we're trying to have a prompt to say, for this particular client, we're still missing this information. And then a request date, use that, fill it in, you'll find it valuable. When you start saying, hey, I've been asking for 5 weeks for this information, and you're saying you need cabinets in 2 weeks, whose fault is that? You need to manage expectations, and this is a great way to manage expectations. Then a priority, kind of remind them when you'll see in the other area where we can invite them into it and they can see this, that we're saying this is a high priority item, or it's a medium priority item, or it's a low priority item. And then, does it affect the delivery date? We may have some questions that wouldn't affect their delivery date. Most will, and we want to say that, yes. If you don't get us the answer to this question, your delivery date can move. Every week that we don't have an answer to this question, your delivery date could move, and then you'll link that to their project. So these elicitations are the questions or the things we need to proceed. And then you'll have a list of the current projects for each one of your customers. If you link the customer to the project, you'll see this for both the homeowner and for the builder if they're both involved. This will be available. They don't see this, just you will see this. And here you're kind of keeping track of, if you want to do that in here. You don't have to do that, but a piece of this is you can keep track of how much they owe you. Each payment is posted through here very simply and easily, and if you're using Custom Cabinet Estimator, you'll find this very valuable because of the delivery cost calculations that it does for you. And we'll spend more time talking about that when we get to that section. And then here we have their previous projects, and this particular one doesn't have any, but if you had 10 projects that you'd done for this person, they would be listed here, and so you'd have that, what you've sold them recently. Instead of looking at this big giant list, you'd be looking at just what this customer has done with you in the way of sales and how they've paid and whether they paid on time and all that stuff. So that's it for companies and contacts. Up next, we'll start looking at projects. Projects will probably be 1, 2, or maybe even 3. So the projects obviously is going to take the longest, projects and rooms, and so there may be several versions of that or several chapters of that so that we can have 3 short chapters rather than 1 giant long chapter. So hope that's helpful, and see you on the next course.